Hey everyone, Theo here. This is my artist review of the M3 iPad Air. First of all, disclaimer, this is not a review unit. So if you guys have the intention to buy this tablet after watching this video, consider supporting my YouTube channel and the work that I do here by making your purchase through the affiliate links in the video description below. The M3 iPad Air was released in March 2025, and this is just a minor incremental update to the previous M2 iPad Air, which was released 1 year earlier in 2024, which was also a minor incremental update to the M1 iPad Air. So this is a very good tablet, yes, but it's not very exciting. So for my artist review, I will want to compare the M3 iPad Air with the M4 iPad Pro. If you are using an older iPad that is using the Apple Pencil 2 or the Apple Pencil Pro, there is no need to upgrade to this new tablet if your old tablet is still working, because the drawing experience is gonna be quite similar. Right, as usual, let me give you the bottom line up front. So this is a well-made tablet. The M3 processor is really powerful, so you will be able to play graphics-intensive games on this tablet without any issues, without any lag, which is to say that this tablet is more than powerful enough for drawing purposes, and there is 8 gigs of RAM, so you will be able to create many layers with the drawing app that you use. Drawing experience is fantastic, mostly because the pen performance is fantastic. The Apple Pencil Pro is accurate and sensitive, and as I draw this diagonal line, you can see there is no wobble or jitter. So this pen is quite accurate and is definitely good enough for creating professional art. In fact, many artists actually use their iPads to create professional art. The pen supports tilt and slightly over 4,000 levels of pressure sensitivity, if I remember correctly. Palm rejection works really well. This is how thick the brush really is, and the initial activation force of this pen is very low, which allows me to draw thin lines very easily, even with a thick brush selected. So it makes the pen quite versatile. You can press down hard to cover or color areas very quickly, and you can draw with minimal pressure to get the thin lines. The Apple Pencil Pro supports double tap shortcut and the squeeze shortcut, and there is haptic feedback to let you know that you have activated the shortcuts. For this app, I can double tap to switch to the eraser. Now, I actually do not use the double tap or squeeze shortcuts because I find that I activate them too easily. Even when I change the sensitivity of the squeeze, I still would accidentally squeeze the pen and activate the shortcuts. So I will disable the shortcuts. Latency is not an issue with this tablet, even with the 60 Hz refresh rate of the display. I mean, when drawing, I don't think about the latency at all. The drawing performance to me is very responsive. The display is laminated, so there is no gap between the line and the pen tip. If you're thinking of buying the iPad Air instead of the iPad Pro because you want to save money, it's a good choice. The drawing experience with this versus the M4 iPad Pro is largely similar, so the 60 Hz versus 120 Hz refresh rate doesn't really affect drawing experience. I mean, when I zoom in and out, pan or rotate, the animation still looks smooth. But there are other differences which I will talk more about in the full review later. Another feature of the Apple Pencil is there is the hover mode where you can see the cursor or the shape of the brush, and there is barrel rotation, so you can turn the Apple Pencil to change the direction of the cursor or the brush shape. So this, for example, will allow me to color this table like this with horizontal strokes or with vertical strokes, depending on how I hold the pen and also how I rotate the barrel. I like to use my tablets outdoors for urban sketching, so I like to sketch on location. And I prefer to have an 11-inch tablet over the 13-inch tablet because this is smaller, easier to handle with one hand or two hands. And this is also lighter, so I can hold this tablet for long periods of time without feeling discomfort. The 13-inch tablet is much bigger and it's not as easy to handle. So for the larger tablet, I will usually have to find a table to set the tablet on the table for drawing. But for this tablet, I can actually hold the tablet like this to sketch. And many of the sketches that I have drawn on the train while commuting to work were actually drawn with me holding the tablet while standing. So these are some of the old sketches that I have drawn with different models of iPads that I have reviewed over the years. The drawing experience with the Apple Pencil is quite consistent across all the different iPad models. It's just that the different iPad models would have different features. Yeah, so between this M3 iPad Air versus the M4 iPad Pro, the drawing experience is mostly similar. Even though this tablet does not have an OLED display, you are still getting a great looking LCD. The colors are vibrant. The brightness is up to 500 nits for the 11-inch model or 600 nits for the 13-inch model. Resolution is high. The visuals are sharp. There is the anti-reflective coating. Viewing angles are terrific. So this is still a wonderful display. In terms of value for money, I do feel like this time the iPad Air does provide good or decent value for money simply because the M4 iPad Pro is significantly more expensive. But before you buy this, do compare the price for the M3 iPad Air with the refurbished M2 or M1 iPad Pros that you can find from the refurbished section on Apple's website, because if the price difference is not too big, maybe it might be worthwhile to go with the refurbished iPad Pros for the extra features, which I will talk more about later. And now on to the full review. Let's just take a really quick look at the items included with the M3 iPad Air. So in the box you will find a quick start guide and some paperwork, USB-C to USB-C charging cable which is braided, and a USB-C charger. Let's compare the design. The M3 iPad Air looks quite similar to the M4 iPad Pro, but there are some subtle differences. So the bezels on the iPad Pro are slightly smaller, and the iPad Pro is thinner. This is just 5.3mm for the 11-inch model and 5.1mm for the 13-inch model. And for the iPad Air, this is 6.1mm, which is quite thin. And what's surprising to me is, according to what I saw on GSM Arena, the battery capacity in the thinner M4 iPad Pro is actually higher compared to the thicker iPad Air. Corners for the body and the displays are rounded off. There's a 12 megapixel camera on both tablets and they support center stage. Now on the iPad Pro, there is also the true depth sensor which can give you background blur, and this also supports face unlock, but the iPad Air does not have face unlock. On the top of the iPad Air, there is the power button with built-in fingerprint scanner which works fast and effectively. There are two speaker grills here and another two at the bottom. The iPad Air actually only has two speakers, so when you hold the tablet in landscape orientation with the power button at the top like this, the sound will come out from the bottom. So when you're watching videos or playing games like this, you have to make a conscious effort not to cover the speakers at the bottom. On the top of the iPad Pro, there is the power button without any fingerprint scanner, two sets of speaker grills with two speakers, and at the bottom there are also two speakers, so this tablet has 4 speakers, and the audio sounds terrific. The audio on the iPad Air also sounds really good. It's just that because there are 4 speakers on the iPad Pro, the surround or the stereo actually sounds better. So when you hold the iPad Pro in landscape orientation like this, even if you cover the bottom 2 speakers, you will still get audio from the top 2 speakers. This USB-C port on the iPad Pro supports Thunderbolt and USB 4. On the iPad Air, this is USB 3.1 Gen 2, so the transfer speed is 10 gigabits per second, which is a quarter of the speed that you can get with Thunderbolt. Both USB-C ports can output video. So this is the back of both tablets, and on the iPad Air, there are no labels at all. On the iPad Pro, there is the label here. These are the connectors for the Apple keyboard case. There is a 12 megapixel camera on both tablets. There is a flash here on the iPad Pro, but there is no flash on the iPad Air, and there is this LiDAR scanner on the iPad Pro. The back is matte textured and it's metal. So both tablets are really well made. Next, let's talk about the display. So with the iPad Air, you will get a laminated LCD with anti-reflective coating, and the refresh rate is 60 Hz. For the M4 iPad Pro, you will get a laminated tandem OLED display with 120 Hz refresh rate, and there is also the anti-reflective coating. The color quality of both displays look good to me at a glance, and both displays support the wide color gamut, the P3 color space. The advantage of the tandem OLED is you can get much higher contrast ratio. Actually, you can get 1 to 2 million contrast ratio, whereas for the LCD, it's 1 to 1000 or 1 to 2000. That's really the best for LCD, up to 2000. For OLED displays, you can get pure black, and for this tandem OLED, you can get maximum brightness up to 1000 nits or HDR brightness up to 1600 nits. Now for the LCD, you will not be able to get pure black because, at least for this tablet, it's using LED backlight, so there is always the backlight that is showing through, and at certain angles you can see the backlight is quite obvious, and this is sometimes known as the IPS glow. So yeah, take a look at the glow here. Now when the room is bright and you have the two tablets side by side to compare, the difference is not as noticeable, but there is still some difference. And from what I can see, the OLED display is still brighter. By the way, I have disabled the auto brightness on both displays, and I have adjusted the brightness so that they can roughly show off the same brightness. But on the OLED display, I can still see more contrast. Anyway, if you do not have the OLED display by the side to compare, the LCD still looks really good. I mean, the colors are vibrant. The display is bright enough for use indoors, more than sufficiently bright. But if you have to use your tablet outdoors under bright conditions often, go with the OLED display, because with 1000 nits of brightness, the display will be bright enough to go through the strong reflections when you're using this under direct sunlight. And with LCD, even at maximum brightness, 500, 600 nits, it's not going to be bright enough to go through the reflections under direct sunlight. Anyway, when you have both displays under direct sunlight running at maximum brightness, both will overheat in like less than 5 minutes, and I'm saying that based on personal experience. So I use my tablets outdoors quite often, and it's usually really bright, and I'm usually not under the sun but beside the sun, under the shade. I upgraded from the M2 iPad Pro to the M4 iPad Pro simply because of the extra brightness that this OLED can provide. With the M2 iPad Pro with the LCD, 500 nits is just not enough for me since I like to sketch outdoors. For some reason, I can see some color variance as well for these two displays, so I'm actually not sure which one is considered color accurate. There is no way to color calibrate the display or measure the color accuracy, so which one is considered color accurate? In order to get the OLED display, you have to spend a lot more money. So whether the OLED display is worth your money really comes down to what you value. And for me, it's worth it because of the extra 1000 nits of brightness. If I use LCD outdoors, I can't see what's on the display and I can't work on the tablet. So the 500 or 600 nits or even 800 nits LCD displays just does not allow me to work outdoors. Both tablets have retina resolution, which is to say that the visuals are sharp and pixelation is not noticeable. I'm going to list the resolution up here somewhere because I cannot remember the numbers. So the other big difference between the display on the iPad Air versus the iPad Pro is this display has 60 Hz refresh rate and the iPad Pro display has 120 Hz refresh rate. For drawing and writing purposes, 60 versus 120 Hz is not a big issue, it's not a big deal. It's just that when there are a lot of visuals moving on the display, yes, you can see the difference. For example, if I open an app and the app fills the display, a lot of visuals is happening, there's a lot of animation. The animation is smoother. You can see the smoother animation. If I scroll like this, you can see many things moving on the display. Yes, the animation is smoother here. But if you're just drawing, the only thing that's moving while you're drawing is the line. So whether it's 60 Hz or 120 Hz, it doesn't really matter. Even when you zoom in and out, it looks really smooth. So the point I want to make here is you won't be missing out much when you're drawing on a 60 Hz display. As I draw this long sweeping line, pay attention to the gap between the line and the pen tip. So there is a slight difference with latency when drawing and writing on the iPad Air versus the iPad Pro. Now on the iPad Air, I can see a small gap as the line chases the pen tip. Let's switch over to the iPad Pro with the 120 Hz refresh rate. I have to pair the pen first. So you can pair and charge the pen by attaching the Apple Pencil Pro to the side of both tablets like this. Okay, so as I draw, the gap between the line and the pen tip is actually smaller. And the reason for that is because as the line appears, the display will already show you the line because the display is refreshing at 120 Hz. So it will show you more frames. So as soon as the line appears, it will show you the line. Whereas on the LCD display, there is a slightly bigger gap. So right now I'm drawing on the iPad Air and latency while drawing on the iPad Air is not really an issue here. I don't really notice the latency unless I'm looking out for it specifically. So when I am drawing, I'm not thinking about the latency at all. I'm just, well, drawing. If I pan, zoom, and rotate on this tablet, the animation still looks pretty smooth to me. And on the iPad Pro, when I pan, zoom, and rotate, yes, the animation seems slightly smoother, but it's not really a big deal. The last difference that I know of between these two displays is with the M4 iPad Pro, you have the option to purchase the display with nano texture glass. And to get that option, you have to buy the tablet with 1 TB or 2 TB of storage, which is very expensive. And then you will have the nano texture glass option. So this is how the nano texture glass looks. The reflections will be diffused, so there are no obvious reflections. And this is quite smooth. So the pen tip is still quite smooth on the surface, but the main selling point here really is the anti-glare. Oh, another thing I just remembered is OLED displays have pulse wave modulation. So I've just adjusted my camera settings to show you the flickering. So people with sensitive eyes may be affected by pulse wave modulation or PWM. And if you are not sure whether your eyes can be affected by pulse wave modulation, I recommend you look at an OLED display in person, in a store before you decide to buy, because you won't know whether you are affected by PWM unless you look at an OLED display yourself. Next, let's talk about the pen. So both tablets support the Apple Pencil Pro, and this is sold separately for $129 US. Apple Pencil Pro has the hover feature, so when the pen tip is near the display, you can see the shape of the cursor or the brush that you are using. And Apple Pencil Pro also supports barrel rotation, so you can rotate the pen and the shape of the cursor will rotate with the pen, which is quite cool. There is double tap shortcut, so you can tap and the shortcut would activate, and for this app it will switch between the brush and the eraser. This pen also supports the squeeze feature where you can squeeze the pen to activate shortcuts. Whether you can customize the double tap or the squeeze shortcuts will depend on which drawing app or note-taking app you use. The pen supports tilt sensitivity, slightly over 4000 levels of pressure sensitivity, and palm rejection. And palm rejection works really well, so you can have your palm on the display while you draw and you will not be able to introduce any stray strokes. This pen is really sensitive, so you can press down like hard to fill in areas very quickly with color, or you can draw with minimal pressure to get the thin lines. The pen performance is predictable and consistent. So this is the same pen performance you can expect on the iPad Air and iPad Pro. The Apple Pencil Pro also has haptic feedback when you activate the shortcuts with double tap or squeeze. And there is the Find My feature which allows you to locate your lost pen. The pen tip is matte textured and it's firm, so the pen tip will not move when you are drawing. And this pen tip glides on the display, I would say, quite smoothly, but it's not slippery, so you will be able to get good control over the pen tip. Now, some people may prefer to apply a matte screen protector over the display to get that tactile drawing experience. I no longer use matte screen protectors because I don't like how the anti-glare looks, because the anti-glare from matte screen protectors is different from the anti-glare that you get from the nano texture glass. With matte screen protectors, when the reflections diffuse, sometimes you will get this white haze that covers the whole display, which is bright and glaring. I can't remember the battery life of the Apple Pencil Pro, but I've never had any issues with the battery life, because when you keep the pen, you always keep it by the side of the tablet. So the pen will always be charged. And the next time you use it, the battery life will be at 100%. And now let's talk about the drawing experience while I continue with this sketch, which was actually drawn halfway on the iPad 11. I just added this new building here with the Apple Pencil Pro on the iPad Air. So when I'm using the tablet at home, I will have it on a tablet stand, and this particular one that I have here is the Pablo PR100. This stand has a latch here that allows me to adjust the angle easily, so this will prop up the tablet at a more comfortable angle for drawing. Now if I'm drawing with the tablet outdoors, I will bring the tablet out with a flip case. I prefer to use a magnetic flip case where I can snap the tablet on the case and remove it easily. When I'm outdoors sketching, I would prefer to hold the tablet without the case, which adds more weight. So with an 11-inch tablet, this is actually still quite compact and very portable. And for this tablet, I can hold it like this, but for long periods of time with the weight on this side, my hand can get tired quite easily. So I would prefer to hold it like this or like this. Now with the 13-inch tablet, it's going to be much heavier. So for my portable outdoors digital setup, I would prefer an 11-inch tablet. If I have the 13-inch tablet, I will usually have to find some place to set the tablet down on the table or on my lap to draw. But for this 11-inch tablet, I can actually hold it like this to draw. I can stand and draw. And many of the sketches that you see here were actually drawn on the train while I was standing. I didn't draw these sketches with this iPad Air. It's with another iPad, but it's the same. With an 11-inch tablet, I can hold a tablet like this to draw while I'm standing on the train while commuting to work. The drawing experience with the Apple Pencil Pro on the iPad Air is fantastic. I've just drawn a diagonal line, and this is really straight without any diagonal line wobble. So this pen is really sensitive and accurate. This is definitely good enough for creating professional art. In fact, many artists actually use their iPads to create professional art. So yeah, you can expect really great performance with the pen. There are no surprises when drawing. And I don't find the pen tip to be that slippery, so I can actually control the pen quite well. On very smooth glossy displays with very smooth pen tips, sometimes the pen will just glide away. But for this, with the default pen tip, this is smooth but not slippery. And you actually have the option to buy other pen tips as well. You can buy the silicone ones just to get more grip. Another diagonal line, and this is really straight. Pressure sensitivity works great. So this is how thick the brush really is. And I can press down hard to fill in areas like this if I need to fill in areas like this. There are many wonderful and capable drawing apps available from the Apple App Store, and Procreate is probably the most popular drawing app. But right now I'm actually using Medibank Paint for drawing. If you also want to do graphic design work that requires typography, layout, or vector, there are many capable graphic design apps available from the Apple App Store as well, such as Adobe Illustrator and other Adobe apps, Affinity Designer, Affinity Publisher, Affinity Photo, Amadine, Linearity Curve. And when I am sketching, it really feels like sketching because I'm not applying much pressure. Palm rejection works really well. There will not be any straight strokes when drawing. The drawing experience of the iPad Air is very similar to the iPad Pro. So if you want to save some money by buying the iPad Air, go ahead. You can expect really fantastic drawing experience as well. But do compare the prices with the M3 iPad Air versus the older refurbished iPad Pros that you may be able to find on Apple's website. If the price difference is not too big between the older refurbished iPad Pros versus the new M3 iPad Air, I would maybe recommend you go with the iPad Pro, the refurbished iPad Pro, because having 120 Hz refresh rate does look good and feels good. The four-way speakers sound nicer, and there is a face unlock, which is quite convenient. Oh, speaking of face unlock, when you have the tablet on the table like this, you have to hold the tablet up for face unlock to work. But I guess you can say the same for the fingerprint unlock as well, because you still have to hold the tablet up here to use the fingerprint scanner. Let's look at some obvious line variation. Because this pen is so sensitive, when you are drawing the lines like this, there is some variation with the thickness, so that actually makes your line art look better. Because if the line is too uniform, it looks too stiff. And while drawing, you may not be able to see, but I have actually activated the double tap undo and the squeeze shortcuts several times unintentionally. So when I'm drawing, I usually will disable the shortcuts. Those double tap and squeeze. See, it happened again. Yeah, it is quite irritating when you're drawing halfway and then suddenly you start erasing because the eraser shortcut was enabled. I use my tablets for sketching. I'm not into digital painting, so my art is usually just line art with flat colors or some gradients, and I don't actually use many layers. Shown on the screen right now are the number of layers you can create with Procreate when you are creating an A4 size canvas at 300 dpi. So if you want to create many layers with this tablet, you can certainly do so because this tablet has 8 gigs of RAM, which is more than sufficient for most drawing purposes. I believe I have covered everything I wanted to say about the M3 iPad Air. So if you guys have other questions regarding this tablet, let me know in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next video. Bye.